We're going to move on now to the Tory second job scandal. So it's basically 1987 all over again, or 92, whenever it was when the Tory sleaze really started kicking in. So this is a big story of the day, and it's footage that you've probably seen on some of the news channels yesterday of the former Chancellor, Kwasi Kwarteng. There he is, talking about, well, he was paying in pounds sterling, and he's in his parliamentary office there, Jason, with a bottle of wine and a couple of empty glasses on the shelf behind him, and what looks like a bottle of spirits on the top shelf. And a great big magnum of something on the right-hand side there behind his head. Oh, dear. There they are, they're talking about, they're basically, it's Kwasi Kwarteng and former Health Secretary Matt Hancock hawking, which is so very nearly the right word, themselves to a fake Korean consulting firm for £10,000 a day. Now, there are many people in this country for whom that is the annual salary. But anyway, Sir Graham Brady, who's the chair of the backbench 1922 committee with the power of hiring and firing prime ministers, pretty much, he asked for £60,000 a year. And all three offered to take time off from Parliament to visit Korea or hold meetings or fit in this very important second job along with their main one. And Kwarteng actually offered to introduce them to Boris Johnson. As if, who'd want that? I could introduce you to the Honourable Member of Occupation South Ruislip. Whoa, that's worth 10 grand a day to anybody, isn't it? Now, Jason, it's worth pointing out that led by Donkeys, which the campaign group organised all this sting, they contacted 20 MPs by email with the bogus offer of a job for a consulting firm. There's Mr. Hancock talking about the hourly rate, what kind of number he wanted. What were you thinking, Mr. Hancock? We've all wondered that, I'm afraid. And then he gazes into the middle distance and, 1,500, that'll be about right. Like he's doing some sums, like how many minutes it costs for him and his time. Same there for Graham Brady. What's your daily rate in mind at this point in time? Oh, I don't know about a daily rate. I think I want being paid per year, if that's all right with you. Sounds a bit like, a freelancer to be paid by day. But they've contacted 20 MPs with this offer. The rest of the MPs, the other 17, they either didn't respond. They checked out the website and saw that it looked a bit dodgy. They thought, hang on, I've been contacted by a Nigerian prince. Or they just logged off of the call once they got onto it. They smelt a rat, basically. They never took part. So do you think, is this proof that the people who've actually been running the country, who was stupid enough to fall for this sting, are in fact complete donkeys, like it says on the side of the tin?
And this is the most amazing thing, because these stings, they do them every 3 or 4 years. Do you remember there was one about 5 years when they got Jack Straw and Malcolm Rifkin's? And, there was ones before that. And you go, they must realise, you think, they have half a brain cell, that if somebody's approaching them, offering large amounts of money, it could possibly be a setup. But they don't, didn't any of them have the kind of nous just to maybe just Google this fictitious Korean company? I can't believe it.
I presume the reason they chose a Korean one is that it would come up with loads of Korean results that they wouldn't be able to read or something. But 17 of them managed to figure it out.
They do actually have taxpayer-funded researchers working for them. They might want to turn to a researcher and say, this looks a bit dodgy. I've never heard of this company before. Can you just check it out for me before I agree? But no. All they saw was pound signs.
Exactly. The smell of the green, I think, rather overwhelmed the olfactory abilities to smell a rat. Now, Jean says it's time to end the second jobs. We might get decent people that go into politics for some reason other than making money. That would be nice, wouldn't it, Jean? Although I do think we've got to say, considering his tax statements that were published last week, Rishi Sunak is plainly not in it for the money, because he makes more sat on his backside than he does actually sat at his desk. So I don't think we can say he's not in it for the cash. He's just in it for the power and the influence. Yeah. What do you think, everybody? What do you think about? We all know, really. That's a silly question to ask. What do you think about these MPs asking for this much money a day? Because it is ridiculous. But let's have something more sensible. What is your solution to the problem of second jobs for MPs? Because as Jean says there, they should just ban all second jobs. What about a doctor who is also an MP? What about someone like Rosina Allen-Khan, who goes in and does a shift at A&E as well? You can't ban second jobs in all cases, can you? How do we find a way through it? And let's be fair to these guys, right? I'm going to try. It's Monday morning, it's 9:19. I'm going to try to be fair to Matt Hancock. They are backbench MPs now. They're not cabinet ministers. They've recently found themselves with an awful lot of time on their hands, Jason. To be fair, they're probably unemployable in other jobs like Lidl or a call centre or a tyre shop, places where you need to actually have some skills, some charm, some basic maths. So if someone rings up a tramp who's asleep under a bridge and offers him 10 grand a day, he's going to take the call, isn't he? Is any of this really that surprising or that bad?
Susie, I was looking up.
I believe I said that.
I was looking up some stats for Matt Hancock's constituency in Suffolk. Yeah, there's 1 in 7 people in that constituency in fuel poverty. In the last decade, the number of children in poverty in Suffolk has gone up by 26%. There are plenty of issues he, as a constituency MP, could be trying to resolve, could be championing. I can't believe that he hasn't got stacks and stacks of constituency issues, letters, concerns which need dealing with, which he could be dedicating his time to in Parliament. And that applies to all the other MPs who take these lobbying consultancy paid work. I do accept it's a difficult area for whether somebody like Rosina Allen-Khan should continue practicing as a doctor. I can understand, for example, why some politicians would want to write pamphlets or books on politics, which I think is totally legitimate. They may even want to write for newspapers for money. I understand that. It is about politics. What I think is totally unacceptable is you're paid £84,000 a year to represent people who need help, and some of these people genuinely need the support and kind of intervention of elected representatives to improve people's lives, but they are allowed to get very, very large amounts of money for part-time jobs, which are clearly a distraction and prevent from doing their job properly. It's totally unacceptable. And it comes back from this kind of 18th and 19th century idea, which is why we still have these ridiculous sitting hours in the House of Commons. For example, the House won't sit this afternoon until 2:30, because they saw this as a kind of part-time job, and it should be a full-time job. And most MPs do work very hard, but it's absolutely ridiculous when. If you talk to Labour MPs, particularly in those in inner city areas where they have so much casework and they don't have enough time to do it, but our MPs out there, like the Geoffrey Coxes, who can make massive money by doing their legal work at the same time, and it must just feel insulting to them.
It's one of those things, perhaps, where there's a second job that can somehow, or a second source of income, which can somehow enhance your powers as an MP, that can help or continue to be political or continue to represent your constituents doing something, or the kind of second jobs which are plainly just lining your pocket or are nothing to do with your role as an MP. And Mike says, as you mentioned in there's the constituency issue, and Kwasi Kwarteng, it says in the copy, he didn't mention his constituents once in the phone call. So they're talking about when you can take time off, when you could come to Korea, could we have this meeting, blah, blah, blah. Doesn't mention at any point, I need to be in my constituency on Fridays, or I need to do this, or I need to do that kind of thing.
And that's even before, Susie, we get to the potential conflict of interest.
Yeah.
It's, there's every time you enter in some sort of financial transaction which is outside your normal job, in this case, MPs, you're going to leave yourself liable to a conflict of interest. Because, you may be able to declare it and you may say above all, but it surely will influence you. If you're being paid whatever it is, 60 grand a year, or in Kwasi's case, even more, this was a negotiation for the lawyers, then that shouldn't be allowed, because if there's any chance or possibility that you could be compromised, that should be stamped out right at the beginning.
Exactly. And it's, as speaking as a self-employed freelance myself, if someone got on the phone and said, I'd like to offer you a job with the consultancy for a lot of money, I'd say, yes, please, thank you very much. But on the call, I would say, who else? Who are you consulting for? This is a Korean consultancy. So tell me it's not Kim Jong-un, please. Who am I getting into bed with? Who else is in the bed, basically? Do I want to deal with you or not? You would ask about your own reputation and how the job with the next person is going to enhance or destroy that. And these guys don't seem to have asked those questions either. Now, Mike says the problem isn't that MPs are greedy and venal. Are you sure? The problem is that Commons, whenever they are asked about second jobs for MPs rule, that it should be allowed, citing the occasional MP who works in the NHS, as I just did. It would be very easy to provide a carve out for some professions and ban consultancies. You could ban some directorships as well, couldn't you? But then you've got perhaps some MPs who are involved in charity work, who are trustees for something. And once you start saying that, say, being a charity trustee is okay, you might find there's workarounds that people start setting up a charity and, oh, I'm a trustee for this charity. And actually the charity is doing the jobs of what used to be a lobbying firm or something. There's going to be ways, if you have that carve out that Mike suggested, people would find a way around that, wouldn't they, Jason?
I think the rules can be tightened up to take into account those factors. This is just them trying to find excuses not to do it because they want to keep a kind of, a snout to the trough. I just don't get it. Yeah. But you can draw up a list of clear exemptions. It wouldn't have to be very long. And for the rest of them, it's all banned. Do your job, do it full time, represent your constituents. They need representing.
Yeah. And maybe work 9 o'clock till 5:36, like everybody else in the country. I think it's part of the problem is that most of us do one job and we find it quite difficult to fit that in with all our other commitments and family and everything else. And we don't really understand how someone else can manage to do 2 or 3 or 4 or even. And it's got to be pointed out, in this particular instance, these aren't second jobs we're talking about. Brady already has 3 other jobs, including being an MP. This would be his 4th job. Kwarteng is a private landlord, which obviously doesn't spend much time doing. He owns a flat that he rents out. But Hancock has obviously already got a second gig as a reality TV star on the go. So it's 3rd, it's 4th jobs in some cases. But then, like I said, we've got a prime minister who earns more in interest from his investments than he does actually as the prime minister. I think we're entitled to ask, aren't we, when they are earning so much from doing other things, which thing is it that's their priority?
Themselves.
Well, you cynic, Jason. Now, Pat says, what does it matter when there's nothing we can do about it till the general election? Even then, if more people don't go and vote, it won't change then. And, Pat, don't forget, if you vote this year, photo ID. Take your driving licence or your passport because you will need to use it this year in order to vote. Don't go along there, get turned away and then decide you can't be bothered to go back again. Take photo ID this year. Tell everybody, or next time rather. Well, no, it is this year because there's local elections coming up.
Yeah, it's local elections, first time.
You must use photo ID from now on. Do not let your vote get stolen by that change to the rules. Now, as you can expect, Labour are pretty livid about all this and at the same time absolutely delighted. So 2 Labour front benchers, Angela Rayner and Tangam Debonair, have written an op-ed in the paper saying how appalling it all is and that a Labour government would ban second jobs and clean all this up. But I think I'm right in saying that Labour are talking about just banning the government from having second jobs, which is the cabinet and some of the junior ministers. As these guys aren't either of those things anymore, under Labour's plans to make it all so much better, exactly the same thing would still happen. These are backbenchers. They're ex-ministers.
They did put it to a vote last year, Susie, Labour, which was for MPs as well as cabinet members. But it was within the limitations we discussed. So, it was directorships and consultancies they were trying to ban because they understood that the kind of, the NHS workers, the people serving as police officers, etc. But they have tried to push this through.
Right. Okay. Well, hopefully, if they actually get into power, it would get a little bit tighter and tougher. If we get a few more stories like this, I suspect they would have to, wouldn't they? They'd have to start saying it's just banned, and that's that. frankly. Now, the argument from the other point of view, tell me what you think about this, everybody. The argument from the other point of view is that if you ban people who are very good at their jobs and do very good, well-paying jobs, like your barristers, like your Geoffrey Coxes and so on, that means you can, if you have those people in Parliament, you have a greater skill set in Parliament, you have people who have a higher quality of MP. That's the argument for. Right, but unfortunately, the quality of MP that you get is Kwasi Kwarteng and Matt Hancock. I had to say all those words in a line. I can't believe it. That argument, Jason. I'm sorry, I'm actually crying. That argument is just blown apart as soon as you actually look at the people that you have doing the job, doesn't it?
We get their skills when we're elected, and then they still have those skills. They just don't have to keep practicing them when we're MPs. And to take this the point here, it's not affecting their first job priorities, but it is affecting their first job priorities. That's the point I keep running home. You know, there are people in Matt Hancock's constituency who need support and help. There is a lot of casework there. There are people who, you know, there's people on the housing waiting list. There are children who can't get the kind of the education they need or support for one-to-one tuition. I can go on and on about all the issues which need solving. Yeah, these are full-time jobs. And actually, if MPs spent less time doing second jobs and more focusing on some of their first jobs, it would actually bring out the change we need because the government would have to react to it.
Yeah, and instead of a lot of that casework, it says in the op-ed in the paper there, casework is higher than it's ever been for a lot of MPs because of the cost of living crisis, because there are people being evicted, because there are people losing their jobs, because there are people who can't afford to pay for their bills and having their benefits sanctioned and all this kind of stuff. There is more work for them to do because they get those letters in, they need to write letters to ministers, they need to find things out, they need to go to the Commons Library, they need to represent them in Parliament, they need to give the answer back, they need to try and help and fix all these problems when someone gets caught in the wrong part of the machinery of state. And if you're not doing that, you're not being an MP.
One final point, Susie. If they were working full time, they could actually have more time to scrutinise legislation as opposed to the kind of hour and a half set aside to look at Rishi Sunak's Windsor framework last week. Yeah. Or the rather rushing through the illegal immigration bill. You know, they could actually spend more time deliberating properly over the laws which are going to affect our lives. Yeah, and they always say we've got to rush this through because we haven't got enough time. They have time. They just make them work more.
Yeah, I did see as well, though, that I think it was in Private Eye the other week reported that actually there's so little work in Parliament itself that they're scheduling. You know, people are starting at 2:30 in the afternoon. People are starting later that and rising at, you know, very early in the evening compared to what they used to do, because there isn't enough stuff in the actual schedule to do. And so that's why the Speaker, Lindsay Hoyle, is allowing a lot of urgent questions and stuff to get tabled, because it's starting to pack out the parliamentary day and look like there's more things happening, because actually there's not enough going on, or certainly not under Boris Johnson. There wasn't enough going on in the House to justify a lot of what they were doing. So, and I suppose it's perhaps the government's fault. Should the government actually just be tabling more legislation and making them work harder?
I think that just more deliberation of the legislation which affects our lives is what's needed. I think, you know, these bills get rushed through very quickly nowadays, and without the scrutiny they deserve.
Yeah, well, that'd be nice, wouldn't it? But they're obviously busy talking to Korean consultancies on Zoom. They can't possibly get to Parliament as well. And they've got all that wine to drink in Kwasi Kwarteng's office. Thank you for taking us through all that, Jason. Thank you, everyone, for your questions. Do you have any solutions or fixes for this? Do you think, like our speaker there earlier on, that you don't have a problem with these second jobs? Is it enhancing their role in Parliament? Is it making sure that we get a better quality of MP? I said it again. Or do you really think that this is kind of the problem? The quality of MP we are attracting is not the right kind of MP because they can do these second jobs. Let us know.